So there's a lot that's being tossed around my head at any given moment. Of course, what we do here on the channel is we try and provide you with the information that you want and need to know in order to have a stress-free vacation and, have your planning go a little bit smoother. And what that actually looks like behind the scenes is me and Russ and other family members that I have that are doing the things that we're talking to you about ultimately. All the things that we experience and the thoughts about those things that we experience all being tossed into one pile, lots of conversations happening. And then fundamentally what ends up happening is we think about how to work through the issues that we run into. In some cases, me, Russ, sometimes other family members as well, but it's usually Russ and myself. We'll put ourselves into positions that are less than comfortable or into situations that you might find yourself in, not even realizing that you're putting yourself into that situation. Our night at Magic Kingdom was actually a great example of this. We found ourselves wanting to do a few different things that evening. We didn't want to sit around and wait for the parade for over an hour, so we moved on to something else. And then we told you, let's go take a look at what the repercussions of our decisions actually look like. We're going to make our way into the hub to see if we can find a place for the parade. I know we're not going to have a great spot, but that's what happens when you don't sit and wait the hour. So we're going to show you what the repercussions of our decision look like.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, let's go. And we're not just doing this because we're gluttons for punishment, though I'm sure that some people out there might argue that that's the case. But what we want to do is we want to find real ways to work through real problems. And then we can tell you about those things, what worked, what didn't, here's what we think you should do. All the stuff that we talk about here on the channel, it comes from situations like that. How would the average family go about doing this? What are the wants and needs of the average person visiting Walt Disney World? What are the wants and needs of a person who has never been here before? And how do we make sure that they have the tools that they need to do this without feeling like they're gonna freak out because nothing is going right? And over the years, we found ourselves working through so many different types of situations, testing so many different types of tips and tricks, tallying how many times we can recreate this solution, and if that solution is one that we think is worth trying or worth putting into practice. Is this method something that I can tell you to do and know that it's reliable, or is it something that people are just spitting out in a 30-second clip, posting it on social media, and you might be relying on realizing that it doesn't work at all? And just like I've been saying a lot, especially recently, there are hits and there are misses. There are things that work and things that don't. There are things that are going to work for some families and things that aren't going to work for other families. All of this is normal. All of this is fine. All of this is part of the vacation planning process and experiencing things in life, whether we're talking about visiting a vacation destination like Walt Disney World or Universal, or if we're talking about exploring an out-of-the-way place in whatever town in whatever state. Which, again, I say from experience. I've traveled all over the country. I've lived overseas. I've traveled all over that country as well. So it's one of those things that I'm talking to you about, I'm communicating to you about from a place of being willing to try the things that you probably don't have the opportunity to try on your own, or, working my way through situations that you might not have the time to work through during your very limited amount of time that you're here on vacation. And the downside to this is that when you present some of these things, when you communicate some of these things like I do here on the channel, there are people who they don't necessarily appreciate that perspective. They see the negative things that I talk about and they get a little upset about that, for a lack of a better word. But then there are other people who see it for what it is and appreciate it, just like with everything else. There are hits and misses, right? And this is something that has been coming up in conversation, not only here when we discuss things and in the comment sections and in some of the messages that I've received from people, especially recently, but also in some of the live chats that I've done with my channel members. This is something that we do a couple times a week. I just kind of sit down with them and discuss whatever's on my mind. But this has been coming up enough that I was like, you know what, let's sit down and have a chat about this. Let's talk a little bit more about it. Especially when it comes to this thing that at least I feel has been happening a lot more frequently. We kind of touched on this in our recent video over at Magic Kingdom, and that is this I guess you could describe it as like a wall that we're finding ourselves up against, more specifically when it comes to visiting the Walt Disney World Resort. Now, right off the bat, I know there are a lot of people who are going to say, well, you visit too often and that's the problem. That's not the problem. And I know you can fight tooth and nail with me on this one, but the issue is coming from a place that isn't just, oh, this is boring. The issue is coming from a place of, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, knowing there are problems, knowing that there are solutions out there, and struggling to find those solutions as easily as I've been able to find them in the past, which kind of contradicts the whole like, well, you spend a lot of time here, so that's why you can't work through this. Because since I do spend a lot of time here, I should be able to work through these things easier than the average person, and I'm struggling. And I know that this comes across in some of the conversations that we have, especially recently. And I know that there are people out there who are probably wondering, like, what is that all about? And I've been thinking a lot about it. Russ and I have been having a lot of conversations about this very topic. And I think I've kind of pin down what the issue is. And I know some of you aren't going to necessarily like it. Some of you aren't going to believe me, but you know what? We're having a conversation. I'm being open and honest as always. But that is that the experience at Walt Disney World, the environment that is the Walt Disney World Resort, is shifting. It's not the same thing that it was last year or even the year before that. And you know what I tell you guys all the time is that I'm sharing my opinion here. I'm sharing my opinions, thoughts, experiences as I'm having them. And I've always been open to shifting my opinion. You know, my view changes just like everyone else. I'm not stuck with one perspective that I refuse to zoom out of. But I'll also admit that I'm too stubborn to be swayed as easily or as quickly as some other people might be. Generally speaking, if my opinion has changed, if I've shifted perspective on something, it's not because of just one little instance and then I change my mind and I see everything differently from this point forward. It's usually because I go, that's interesting, and then I see it again and again and again and again. And right now, in this moment, that's what's happening for me when it comes to the Walt Disney World Resort. I'm finding that the experience is changing in such a way that I can't brush off, excuse away, ignore. Not that I've ever done any of those things, but I try to cut Disney some slack whenever I can, and I've cut them a lot of slack. And now I find myself sitting here grabbing like the last little bit of rope going, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, especially when I'm trying to talk to you guys about how to make the best of your Disney vacation, and the bar for that has gotten so low that it's like dragging on the floor. And one of the things that you've probably heard me say time and time again over the years is that I think that you can still visit the Walt Disney World Resort and have a fantastic vacation. And I still believe that that is true, and I am still here, ready and willing to tell you how to do that, which, by the way, is all about having the right mindset and knowing what you're getting yourself into so that you can prepare accordingly when things don't go right. And that means having some conversations that are negative. That means offering some criticisms. It's just the way that it is. And I know that there are some people who are listening to this right now and you're thinking, keep it up, don't change, don't worry, I have no intention of doing that. And I'm not saying this because I'm feeling bad about the way that I do things. Like, just for clarity's sake, I just want to give you a look into what it is that I do, and I want to give you a little bit of insight into why I do things the way that I do. That's why we're having this conversation. But anyway, on top of providing you with that insight, that honest, real look at things, good, bad, otherwise, sometimes even ugly, you know what I mean? I don't feel good about not also mentioning how hard it is to arrive at that conclusion, how difficult, like I said, it is to work through some of these situations that weren't as difficult to work through 6, 12, 24 months ago. Now, what you do with that information, that's up to you. But for those of you out there who have been following along and you're wondering, like, where has this shift come from? Why does Kat feel the way that she does? Why does Russ feel the way that he does? Because he's communicated his thoughts unfiltered on this as well, like when we had our conversation at Magic Kingdom the other day, which is exactly what I shared with you when I pulled that video together. We also had more conversations off camera that we didn't get into. We just had other things that we were focused on during our little Magic Kingdom night, so we figured we'll save that for another day or incorporate it into a future discussion, especially once our thoughts are a little bit more organized on the topic. I know we are touching on some of those themes and some of the things that we discussed off camera today, but if you've ever wondered where the shift has come from, I know some of you have come straight out and asked me about that in the past. This is it. It's this challenge that we're finding ourselves facing when we're trying to do the things that we know you guys are trying to do. It's the diminishing number of alternatives and options and workarounds when it comes to dealing with some of these things that we're up against, that you guys find yourselves up against. And when you combine that with the long list of other factors that we're experiencing in the parks, just like you guys are, whether the camera is out or not, we're finding ourselves asking the question, How is the average person supposed to do this? And is it worth the price that the average person is paying? What are the options that are available for those people? Can you still manage to do this and have a good time if you're a first timer? All of those things are going through our heads all the time so that we can provide you useful information. Just like I said earlier, I'm not going to get into it all over again, but yeah, those are just some of the things that have been going through my mind this morning, and quite frankly, they go through my mind on nearly a constant basis. And especially as we move forward with some of the other things that we've been doing recently, we've been visiting some other places. I know I kind of mentioned this the other day as well. We can't help but wonder if this really is the quality experience that it claims to be, and that other people claim it to be, especially when it's compared to something else, which is something that we've said multiple times in the past as well. This is expensive compared to what? It's affordable compared to what? It's a great experience compared to what and for whom? That's a really important thing to factor into all of these discussions, and we often try and factor that into so many of the discussions that we have here on the channel, and we're going to factor them into so many more in the coming year. But yeah, love it or hate it, that's a look into what's been going on behind the scenes here, and a little taste of some of the conversations that have been happening off camera, not only about the Walt Disney World Resort and how to work through some of the stuff that we've been up against with the Walt Disney World Resort, but also we ask basically similar questions when it comes to every other place that we've visited, including Universal, as well as a number of other places that we've been recently. We just haven't told you about them yet. But of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. I know that there are some of you out there who have been experiencing something similar. Some of you have reached out to me and communicated just that. So if you have any thoughts, pop them in the comments down below. I know some of you are going to completely disagree with me, and that's fine too. Just keep it respectful. It's not that difficult. We don't have to agree when we have our conversations, but we do have to treat each other like human people. You know what I mean? So just keep that in mind when you share your thoughts on this, if you decide to share your thoughts on this. And yeah, have a great rest of your day wherever it is you are. Also, if you happen to be watching this before the holiday and you are celebrating, I hope you have a fantastic one with your family. And when all else fails, be the weird one at the table. Until next time, guys. Bye.